Okay, folks, we're getting started now. Welcome. My name is Bill Burkett. I'm the superintendent of Central Public Schools. If I haven't met you, welcome. This is our fourth public meeting for the Cushing-Hatherly School project. And I think it's looking like it might be our biggest turnout. So thank you for investing your time to join us tonight. It's super important. This is being recorded, and we'll get this out and put it on the website. So if you have friends or family that couldn't make it tonight, they will have access to all of this presentation. So tonight, we're moving on to an exciting phase. We started with the many options. We moved, which is about 23. We moved to the few, which is where we are now with 6. We'll get into those tonight, and then we've got to get down to the one, the choice of this is the school, and then we start getting into the real detail, and again, we'll get through all that tonight. That's kind of conceptually where we are tonight. A little background on how we got here. We're a year in the process, still a ways to go. But what I'm proud of, and what you'll see up here, some of the renderings by our excellent architects, is a culmination of all the input from the community. So, and I'm sure a lot of you are participating in this. Public meetings is one way we get feedback. We had several focus groups. We had visionary groups, which were large groups of stakeholders, parents, community members, staff, you name it. We had a big group in. We took the building committee, which is representative of the greater community as well, has gone on to several new school site visits to actually see what schools look like. So we took all that information over several meetings over a long time and kept molding that and stayed true to what the people and what the community wanted and reflected in what our educational values are. The timing's really good too, because we just, as a community, created our new strategic plan, which we'll be rolling out this fall. And those educational values, again, collaboratively done with the entire community, I think are going to be reflected very well in this beautiful new school. And again, there's still things that need to be tweaked. It's still got a lot of input and ways to go. So we encourage that. We're going to give you all an opportunity tonight and ongoing to ask questions, offer feedback, and just want you to know that my email is wburkett@sit.org. You can always email me directly with any questions, or if you want to meet, talk about this. It's that important to all of us, or if anybody on the board we can make available to you. So I know these public forums aren't always convenient for everybody, but again, we can meet individually, talk on the phone, anything you want to answer your questions and make sure you're well informed. The whole goal of this is to make sure it's a really important investment. The first thing I think people do when they look for a community, and many of you that may have moved here or been here a while, is you look at the schools. What's the school system like? Whether you have children or not, every good community is reflected with core with great schools. And that's the education inside the school, but it's also the physical structure needs to match that, so operationally that can happen. All right, so without further ado, I'd like to just go around and have the members of the building committee introduce themselves, so maybe you see some familiar faces or you meet some new people. These are the committee members that meet very regularly, talk about this project. If you recognize someone, you want to reach out to them individually, you also have that avenue as well. All right, so I guess I'll start with you guys, and we'll go right around the room here.
Tom Engelsberg, project manager with Dorn Whittier Architects.
I'm Jason Boone. I'm a senior associate and educational facility planner with Dorn Whittier Architects.
And in the back,
Hi everyone, I'm Tom Walter, principal with Dorn Whittier.
Kevin Kelly, Director of Facilities, Town of Situate.
I'm Julie Ward. I'm the Director of Supplemental Services.
Scott Williams, principal, Cushing Elementary.
Maura Carr, select board member. Christine Sheen, principal of Hatherly School. Nicole Regulini, school committee.
Steve Theron, Project Manager, Vertex.
John Lemieux, project manager at Vertex.
Tom Rath, Director of Business and Finance for the school.
And our newest member, effective next meeting.
Chris Karsha, community member of Capital Plan.
Sure. And although not an official member, but part of the working group.
Heidi Driscoll, Assistant Superintendent.
They're all my favorite.
Bruce Meisman's building committee meeting, I was his high school principal.
And I was never in his office. True story, but I love Bruce. He was my favorite principal ever, and I try to emulate a lot of his teaching. So, one of the first people I reached out to be a community member on the board. He dropped everything, including the golf clubs, for a little while, to be here tonight. So, thank you to everybody, and thank you to the board. As you see, we planted the board members sporadically out here to give you whiplash, but also to be comfortable. But we're all here to, and we'll all be able to answer the questions and do our best to inform you tonight. And again, if questions don't come up tonight, please reach out after the fact. This is ongoing. There are ways to go. We just want to make sure. I'm going to have several more of these meetings as we go. We'll have as many as we need to make sure that everybody's informed and has their questions and concerns addressed. Okay? I'm going to turn it over to Tom at this point.
Great. Thank you again, Paul, for coming. Really great to see such a nice turnout here tonight. Just a quick run through of our agenda. We're going to actually have a little bit of an interactive aspect to this meeting, which Jason is going to explain to you. And then we'll kind of have a preamble before we get into the bulk of the meeting, which is kind of the schedule, the process, and the project need. If you were at any of the previous meetings, some of these slides are a little similar, familiar, with a few little changes as we've kind of gone along. And then really the main event is to review the remaining 6 options with the cost estimates that are attached to those for the repair-only, ad rental, and new construction options that we have still on the table. And then we have a what's called a selection matrix. It's basically a table that shows the criteria that we're using that we're going to kind of base our choice on, and give you all an option to look at those and comment on those. And then the design progress on the options. So just a quick refresher, and for people that haven't seen this slide before, this is kind of our organizational chart. We've been working with the school building committee, which is charged by the school committee with dealing with this project, and us in partnership with Vertex, working on the design of the building. And then over here on the left, we have a very important financial partner in the Massachusetts School Building Authority. They're the program administrator and the funding partner for the project. And we do a lot of work with them, and this process is really very much dictated and delineated by them.
So Tom mentioned a few minutes ago that we have an interactive format for you to provide feedback tonight. If you'll point your cameras at this QR code, you'll be asked to go to a link for Mentimeter. And what this will allow us to do, once you're on that site, it will allow you to give feedback to us in real time. So I see a couple of people are liking. If you could just give us a thumbs up when you get there. Lovely. And on certain slides, you'll see that there's an opportunity to provide comments on the content of that slide. What we don't have in this interactive format is a way for you to ask questions, because we'd rather you just ask those live in the room. And if we have an answer, we'd like to give that. And as the superintendent said, if something comes up after the fact, we're also encouraging folks to reach out to the school district and pose those questions after the meeting.
Is there Wi-Fi passwords or something you need to get this thing?
There is no Wi-Fi password, but you need to be connected to the Wi-Fi. There should be a Situate network available, open.
It has no password.
Just have to accept the terms.
Yes, you have to accept the terms. That's right. All right, so overall project schedule, big picture, this is the big picture of the whole project. We're really right in the very beginning part of this, well, kind of halfway through the beginning part of this feasibility study and schematic design upcoming, but we have a long way to go. The main, main kind of next big milestone is the local project funding vote, which is going to happen in April in 2024 next year. So that's sort of the big feature here. If the vote is successful, we'll continue on into design development and construction documents. These are two phases where we develop the design and then do all of the construction documents for building it. Then there's a bidding phase and then the construction administration. We were actually just having a conversation before the meeting. The 22 months or so of construction here may actually be too much. We might be able to make this a little bit less than what's shown here. But the general idea is there. It's roughly about 2 years of construction. The target is to occupy the building summer of 2027 before the school year starts. And then there will be some site construction happening around the new building after that. And then just looking, this is kind of a detailed view of that area that we were just looking at that was circled red. Just want to go over a little bit of the alphabet soup here. You have PDP, which is the preliminary design program. That's the part of the project in the very beginning where we looked at the 23 different options. That part is concluded. The school building committee, as Bill said, narrowed it down to 6 options, which is what we have on the table tonight. That's what we're looking at. So we are nearing the end of the phase we're in now, which is preferred schematic design, PSR, preferred schematic report, is the name of the phase for the MSBA. So we're very close to that. Here we are on 8/16, the night of. We'll be submitting that report right at the end of the month, and that will have the decision to go from the 6 options down to the 1. So your commentary tonight is very important in terms of feeding into that decision. So we will welcome that. And then upcoming from that, we'll be going into schematic design, which is where we start to get quite a bit more detail into the design itself. We start to really look at what the building looks like on the outside. We really don't have any of that kind of design progress yet. And then that's working toward a submission deadline early next year, working up to those 2 key funding votes going on in May of next year. So again, the needs here are really identified in both the Hatherly School and the Cushing School. As many of you may know, some of you may not know, those 2 schools were built 2 years apart. It's basically the same design in 2 different places. They're twin schools, so they have a very similar age and very similar level of, basically maintenance issues going on in the buildings. The basic building systems are pretty much at the end of their life cycle and really need fundamental replacement or significant upgrades. Both schools have temporary modular classrooms, so they're a little bit undersized for what is really needed in terms of space there. And then in basically a tie, Hatherly was determined by the MSBA to be the school that was most in need. So that's really the namesake of the project, but it's really the combination of the 2 schools together is the project. So how did we get here? Bill intimated a little bit of this, suggested a little bit of this at the beginning. So in the very beginning of the project, we had a lot of input from principal interviews and staff interviews. We had a series of visioning sessions, which were great. I think some of you took part in that. And then we also toured quite a few schools in the area that were recently built with buildings done by in partnership with the MSBA. So we got a lot of ideas from that. All of those ideas boiled down into sort of a document that we have called the Guiding Principles for Design, and that's a fairly long list of things that the school building committee wants to have in the building, or features that it wants to have in the building. Along with that, Jason worked along with many of the school building administrators on the education plan. very detailed plan for how education is going to be delivered in this new school or this, renovated school, depending on which way we go. And then we also generated a series of spatial relationship diagrams. Those are things that came directly out of the visioning sessions. How do we want all the spaces in the building to relate to one another? So all of those pieces together generated our site plan options and building plan options. So last time we showed this slide, there were a number of options on here. The grayed out options are the ones that are no longer under consideration. And you'll see that the grayed out options have to do with the Cushing site. Cushing was determined to be too costly and not enough access. There's basically it's a dead-end site access there through a neighborhood, a residential neighborhood, as opposed to Hatherly, which is more on a kind of a major street in that neighborhood, major neighborhood street. So Hatherly was determined to be the favored site. It also has less site development costs. It's also a little smaller site, which is less costly, but also, it's tight. So that's what we're working with. So we have the option that is required to be studied by the MSBA, which is the existing schools to remain, and they would both be renovated and repaired. We have a K-5 school on the Hatherly site for 460 students, and we have one ad reno option and one new option for that one, and then a pre-K school, pre-K-5 school on the Hatherly site for 460 students plus 100 pre-K, and then we have one ad reno and two new options to study on that site. So those make up the 6 options that are under consideration here. So Bill, maybe you want to speak to this one. This is just talking about ongoing maintenance in the other buildings.
Some of this is, since our last presentation has been updated. So a big question that we entertain and something that's very important to us is that Cushing and Hatherly are being impacted here, but all of the elementary schools are being impacted. And we want to make sure that we're respecting the education at all the buildings. So we raised the bar here in the new building, we want to do the same at the other buildings. So we're very conscientious about that. And so what we've done is we've put a lot of our money in capital improvements into the other elementary schools to build them up. And you've probably seen some of that. We've had an unbelievable amount of capital projects going on this summer. And here's just some examples. And I'd like to thank the town and you as community members for supporting these capital projects. Because when I got here 4 years ago, I was challenged to say that we weren't using some of our capital money, that there was money sitting there that had been approved, and that we could do better by our buildings, be more responsible. So we're doing that because we don't want to come back to the community and ask for another new school. This wants to be the last one for quite a while. So some things we're just doing, just recently, all the floors at the high school are being done over. Last year, the library was done over, beautiful. The Wampatuck floors are being done this summer as well. The parking lot is under construction right now as we speak, which will not only make that a much more safer place because of the traffic lines and the throughways and how we bring people in and out of that location, but it'll last a long time. We had the what's that thing that jets out? Portico new last year at Wampatuck, as well as the library was renovated at Wampatuck last year. And Wampatuck's a little older, interestingly enough, than these two buildings. But after all the research and engineers looked at it, it just had better bones, and it's salvageable, and it's a good school. But it needs some TLC, and that's exactly what we're doing here. So we wanted to show you tonight that we're putting our money where our mouth is, and if you have a child that's going to Wampatuck or Jenkins, that you say, oh, my kid's getting taken care of too. And if you're a community member, that's in your best interest too. That all of our schools are being thought of here. It's not just one or two schools. So, including middle and high school. Middle school a little less, obviously, because it's newer. A major locker room renovation was finished last year. It's absolutely beautiful. With all the fields that we have here are some of the best. They rival some collegiate fields that I've seen. But our locker rooms and facilities inside were very outdated and old, and they've been updated. There's phase 2 and 3, which we'll talk about, 3 and 4, 2 and 3, we finished 1, phase 2, that's on board
Starting next week.
starting next week. So Tom will help me fill in some of the blanks on this too. The Jenkins roof, all right? Last year, the teachers invited me. I met with all the staffs at the beginning of the year, and I said, you know, what can I do to help you? And they said, we need a new roof. I'm like, oh my God. Like a teacher, I can handle a new roof. You see the price there. But I said, okay, well, why? Well, it was never done right. It's always been leaking. And so the first day it rained, I went and visited the school. And there were buckets in the classrooms. Kids were walking around puddles. It was real. So we put all our efforts into making that happen. And in less than a year, the new roof is on. You drive by there, you'll see a beautiful new roof. We're just finishing up some loose ends right there, but there'll be no more leaking. So that's a great example of practical, kids in there and teachers trying to teach with the rain coming down and literally fixed with all of your help in the community supporting the capital plans. High school roof. So now we're doing some preventative maintenance. Now that roof's a lot, it's older. That's going to start leaking. It's leaking in some spots, but we said, you know what, let's address that now before it gets to a point where we have to rip the whole thing up. So that summer, that was done. I think is that finished
Finishing
now?
up in the next few days.
Next few days, that'll be done. New roof at the high school, right? HVAC and controls at the high school, we're starting that. That's also starting soon, so obviously very important for, we talk about the quality of life in an older building. It gets a little warmer in the summer, and it's tough on the kids and teachers, so we're taking care of that, very important. And in the breathable air, as we learned through COVID, it's very important that we have healthy air for the kids and for the staff. And then lastly, this has been mainly run by our principal and PTO at Jenkins, so I want to thank them that spearheaded this. Again, it started last year. What started happening is we started getting reporting of unsafe playground equipment, so we started removing them, because that's what you have to do. You can't just leave it there. You can't just say we're going to shut the whole thing down. Well, what started happening over the years is there's like nothing left. And so, so that group went, and I think that's starting this fall. That should be done by the winter. Kids at Jenkins will have a new playground. So as you see, some of these older schools are becoming pretty modernized. Right, so I wanted to point that out. Anything I missed, Tom?
No, that was it.
That was okay. So again, I want to thank, Chris has been a part of the capital committee, and Karen and the select board have been supportive of our town, and all of you have been really supportive of these, and I just wanted to spend some time showing you that it is valuable, it's important, and it's happening. So thank you for allowing me to start. Thank you.
So, as I said before, the project is the combination or the consolidation of Hatherly and Cushing schools into one grade K-5 or pre-K-5 for 460 students. And as I said, Hatherly was determined to be the most advantageous site after we looked at several options on both Hatherly and the Cushing site. So,
Tom, before we go to the next segment, maybe we should pause there. There's a lot of context. We've got a lot of new faces in the audience. Are there any questions on any of that sort of background information context that we've shared so far? Really?
all right, so as I said, we've got 6 options still left on the table. This option, and these are the numbers that have kind of carried through from the previous phase. Option 1 is, as I said, the repair-only option. We've got a picture of the old 1962 blueprint up here, because that's the floor plan that you would be left with. There's no changing of the walls or any architectural changes. It's really all just code upgrades, mechanical, electrical, plumbing upgrades, and making the building safe and modernized. But there's no educational programming changes or any of that kind of thing in this building. So that's just, yeah.
Without creating bias, but being practical, if you haven't been in these buildings, some of the obvious ones are that the gyms
Right here, middle.
are surrounded by classrooms. So I've never seen a building like that. Try learning with the gym, physical education class going on, and you're trying to do a reading lesson. and you walk outside the door to go to the bathroom as a student, and you're in the gym. No safety first. So we're managing it well, but don't know who came up with that concept, but it's educationally unsound. So I just want to point that one out as a major flaw in the current footprints.
And likewise, at this end of the wing, there's a library right in the middle between the classrooms, and that has its own disruptive issues with it. But yeah, those are sort of the main things. The other thing is this building is on 2 levels, and there is a stair there, there's a lift on the stair, but it's not an ideal way for kids in wheelchairs to get around the building. So that's another issue with that existing building. And if people want to know more about that, there's a very detailed report that we have on what the measures are for each of those options. So that's the repair only. The addition renovation options, we have 2 here. One is a K-5 option and one is the pre-K-5 option, as I said before. The floor plan for those are very similar. The site plan is almost exactly the same for those 2, so they're kind of grouped together. These over here, the new construction options, we have 2, again, a K-5 and a pre-K-5. This is the so-called courtyard option, which we'll show you all in more detail. And then the last one is option 19, which is, we call it the T option. It's kind of a T-shaped plan, and that's only for grades pre-K-5. So I think probably enough said about this one. We talked about the issues with the floor plan there. Down votes, yeah.
Just one other thing to mention about this, right? Imagine construction happening in this building while students are also in this building. That would be a necessity for this kind of repair-only scenario.
Thank you for pointing that out. If you could, on the other projects that do have that, because I think that's important to know. Anytime that we do, some of these rentals, I think all of them may have that, where the kids during the year, we have to also consider that students are going to be learning during this construction. We want those students to have a top-class education. And in some of these models, during mid-year, certain sections of classes will be removed and placed in a different area, different classroom. So it's not very conducive to learning and to a good environment. So.
Yeah, that disruption to education during construction formed one of the key criteria by which we evaluated all of the options. Oh, yes.
How long would the construction phase be on this renovation project, roughly?
It would probably be around the same as the other options that we've been looking at. So back to that first slide, it's probably about a 2-year, maybe longer. And the reason for the maybe longer is because, as Bill was saying, you're creating what's called a swing space, which is temporary space, modular, buildings. And a certain group of students moves into that space. They renovate their space in the building. They move in, and then somebody else moves out, and then they renovate their space. So it's that kind of constant hopscotching around that might create a longer duration. So very similar situation for the addition renovation concept. So we have some floor plans we'll look at in a minute, but just kind of roughly, this is the shape of the existing building right here. So this area right here is renovation, and then there's a new 2-story addition kind of put on the back of it, an L-shaped addition, which creates a little bit of a courtyard here. And then this piece is also added onto the side. That's a gym right here, the orange, and then a new mechanical room on the back. And so similarly to what we were just talking about, one of the first things we would do would be to build a new mechanical room so that we're serving the renovated spaces and the new spaces from that new mechanical room. And then going through and renovating the pieces of the puzzle, so to speak. Because we're increasing the population, obviously the parking is going to have to increase. The circulation is actually not too different from what we have right now. One of the kind of negatives of this site plan is that it doesn't have a whole lot more stacking space than what is on that site right now. So I think that's potential liability with this site plan.
buses come in, and instead of sharing space in the front of the building the way they do now, they're actually directed to the, oh yes, wait, traffic patterns. All right, we'll start at the beginning. So pre-K, in this case, pre-K is actually here on this end of the building. They have their own entrance, so they would have their own kind of pull in, drop the kids off, actually walk them to the entrance, drop them off in the building, and then folks get back in their cars and then go back out when they came. So that's pre-K. Buses come in, they go straight to the back, and there's a circle in the back, so the bus drop-off is actually in the rear of the building. It's not ideal to have it in a kind of turnaround situation like that, because the buses kind of have to go in almost like teeth in a saw, and then circle around that area there, but then they have an entrance into the back of the building there. The parent traffic pattern is, like I said, kind of similar to what you have now, with a circle and a drop-off. It, practically speaking, doesn't have a lot of surface area for curb for drop-off here, so that's a little bit of a liability for that one. And then emergency vehicle traffic pattern, and this also kind of goes for service vehicles as well. There is circulation all the way around the building. The negative to this one is it's really close to that back property line, this side property line. Right now, there's a decent buffer, vegetated buffer right there with some of those backyard properties. So that's compromised in this scheme. One of the good things is the Flannery Field stays the same here. So there's not a lot of grading or anything that has to happen on that part of the site. So it's a little bit less costly from a site perspective. But some of those other realities of doing this project are negative. So again, as I said, here is the renovated portion of the building in the front, this kind of N shape or Z shape, however you want to think of it. The pre-K wing becomes the front of the building here. The cafeteria is kind of in the middle in the back, facing really the courtyard, with a little bit of daylight pointing out to the back of the field there. Gymnasium right here. Art and music right here and here. Administration is more or less in the same place that it is now, but it's expanded because, frankly, what they have right now is very small. So that's really taking up most of the front of the building right there. Behind that is the media center. That's kind of pointing into the courtyard. And then we have the kindergarten going along the back here, grade 1 and grade 2 in two kind of blocks here. They're organized around these extended learning areas. And we'll talk more about what those actually are when we get to some of the students. And then the second floor for this option is kind of a repeated floor plan with grades 3, 4, and 5 upstairs in this configuration. So one of the things that, one of the guiding principles for design that wasn't fulfilled in this particular option was having the grade levels separated into two different parts of the building. Here in these options, they're separated by floor, but they're kind of overlapping one on top of the other. So the T option, option number 19, this was created as an alternative to the most favored option, which we'll look at last. And it's really created as it was an outgrowth of an option that was configured on the back of the site. When we found some wetlands on the corners of the site, this building configuration was put in place to basically take some of the great things that we had in that plan and adapt them to the realities of the site by turning the building so that it was going more north-south. The existing building is here. The concept for this new construction is that it would be going on while the building is in session, the existing building is in session. So really the site's going to be divided more or less in half, and folks are going to have to really, during construction, really kind of condense into the front of the site as it is. We're going to talk about the circulation. So similar to what we were talking about before,
Pre-K has its own entrance right here and has its own drop-off and pickup lot right there. So what's nice about this is folks can pull right in and they can walk right in the building, it's very close by. They don't have to cross any drives, any parking lot, or anything like that. So it's a protected line of circulation, and then folks just go right back out. Similarly to what we were looking at, buses go right off the back and drop off on the back side and then circulate around and go out. So they would have an entrance possibility either here or at the end of the building, depending on how we wanted it structured. Parents come in, you'll notice there's a lot more stacking space in this option, and they would come around to this oval in the front of the building, and that would really be serving the main entrance to the building right there. And then service and emergency vehicles, they again have access all the way around the site in the back of the building. Organizationally, this plan works a lot better than the ad-reno plan in terms of separating out the core spaces, the publicly oriented spaces in the middle, with kind of a security barrier here and here, separating out the academic wings on the ends. And now we also have a lower elementary school on this end with pre-K here, kindergarten here, upstairs grades 1 and 2, and then on this side we have an upper elementary with grades 3, 4, and 5 on that side.
And that as an organizing principle was one of the key outcomes from the visioning efforts of both this option and the next one we're calling the courtyard option, achieve that goal much better than the ad-reno options that we just saw a moment ago.
So then upstairs again, these extended learning areas are in the middle. So what these are they're really extensions of the classroom. It's taking some area allocated to the classroom and actually putting it outside the walls of the classroom, and it's used for breakout spaces, for breakout activities, for larger group meetings where not a whole group can fit inside a classroom, but it's a kind of extension of the classroom in that way, and used to really link the classrooms together and give them more of a sense of community. So it's kind of like a community center for that grade.
And Tom, if I can just add to that, when we were working on the educational plan, and Heidi and others jump in here, the district is moving in a direction of what's called universal design for learning, which means meeting students where they are, which means not delivering instruction exactly the same way for every single kid all the time. And so one of the strategies that supports universal design for learning is something that's called a multi-tier system of supports. And so in order to do both of those things, meet child where they are and give them the individual supports that they need, you need more learning environments than just a classroom. Right? Imagine that one kind of activity is happening in a corner of the classroom and the acoustics and the furniture that's associated with that. If you have other environments that you can leverage as a classroom teacher, you have a much better chance of meeting students where they are. How do I deal with that summary?
Awesome. Right now, some of you might be familiar with the win time. What I mean now time happens at the elementary schools. It really happens with a short amount of time during a dedicated period, and we don't have the flexibility like Superintendent Burke had mentioned. The gym connects some classrooms. Using space like this, we could turn much more of the day into flexible learning groupings across grade levels, which would really help all students get the push that they need. Not just pull out some kids for remediation, we can actually make sure kids who need that extended learning have that flexibly across grade levels with classroom teachers, with specialists, and access to all of them without having, I guess, the extreme limitations we have with the structure of the building we have now.
And so those, not only do classrooms benefit from things like daylight and views and strong connections to the outside, but these supplemental learning environments benefit from those same features. And one of the ways that this option is different than what you're going to see in a minute with the courtyard option is that none of the breakout spaces in this T option have direct views to the outside. So when students are in that environment, they're going to have good lighting, they're going to have good technology, but they won't have views to the outside. Those only exist sort of in the classroom environment in this particular option.
All right, so this is the option 18 site plan, and option 7 is similar. So again, we're talking about the pre-K5 configuration is what we're looking at here, but there's also a K5 configuration that's very similar. You'll notice that the site plan is very similar between this option and the T plan. So all of those same great features are really included in here. One nice thing I didn't mention last time is there are spaces for the playgrounds that are directly adjacent to entrances of the building, again, without having to go across driveways, without having to go across parking areas. So there's the lower age playground here and the upper age playground right here. Flannery Field in this option is relocated to this point in the site right here. So it was here. The new building is basically being built in that space, and Flannery is being relocated over here. So it's the same size, roughly the same shape, but it will occupy the same kind of full-size lacrosse or soccer field that is there now. Let's talk about the traffic patterns are very similar to what we were just looking at. The pre-K drop lot right here, park and drop lot. So again, the pre-K entrance is a little bit further around the corner here, but it's a very nice, we're talking about doing a pollinator garden in there, so it would be a nice kind of passageway for the kids to enter and leave the building by. Again, protected parking, separated from the rest of the bustle that's happening in front of the school. Buses come in, turn, and then there's long stretches of curb, mostly here, but also could be up here if we needed to, really just showing the bus area right here for now. But drop off here, and there's a couple of entrances at the corners of the building where the bus users could get in. There's a notion that some of the older kids who are riding the bus with younger kids can actually bring them into the building and drop off their younger peers in the lower elementary wing, and then they continue on through and go to the upper elementary wing. So that's a nice partnership between the small kids and the bigger kids that could happen here. As we just looked at with the other schemes, same kind of configuration here. A lot of stacking space in the circle for active drop-off and pickup along that curb line here. There's something like 40 cars or 45 cars able to be accessing that curb line there, and then more stacking space coming around here. So there's very ample room for getting cars off of Van Vinyl Road, which is the problem that we see now sometimes. And then again, emergency access all around the site, all around here. We actually just had a meeting with the public safety folks this morning, the fire chief, assistant police chief, DPW, Kevin was there, and a couple other folks, the town administrator was there. They looked at these plans, they really liked the idea of having that circulation all around the building. It's a kind of a natural feature that most new schools have.
Just point something out there, Tom, and I think that a lot of feedback we got from folks, especially the abutters, is that we didn't want to clog up that road. So I think in a relatively small space, we did a really creative job of breaking things up into buses, so buses can stack off the streets, parents can stack off the streets, and something that's we really love about this is the pre-K option with a separate drop-off for the pre-K. Because the littles need some help to get out, parents sometimes walk them in. We, in fact, at Wampatuck have to do a separate time for them right now because they all get dropped off at the same spot, and they take a little longer, so they have to come in at a separate time. Where here, they can all come in at the same time and keep the traffic off the street. And while I'm on the pre-K thing, I think we should bring it up, as you see, some models are pre-K and some aren't. And this has come up in prior meetings. I firmly believe that it's important to have the pre-K on the site. I'll give you some reasons why. The current pre-K in Wampatuck is okay. The accessibility is an issue with our playgrounds for children. That's an issue. Also, we wanted an opportunity for the entire community with children at that age to be able to utilize this beautiful new school. So for example, if you don't live in this district, and you say, oh, even though they're fixing up Jenkins, my child is Jenkins, but if you have a child going in pre-K, everybody in Situate can have access to this new school, this new facility for pre-K. And quite honestly, I think it's coming down the pike, and we will be ahead of the curve, that universal pre-K will be here soon enough. And a lot of schools are going to be in reactive mode. They're going to be saying, universal pre-K, it's a law, deal with it, find the room. So I think us being a little visionary in this, and one of the last thing I want to connect to it, brought up the strategic plan. Part of our mission statement in that new strategic plan talks about inspiring and challenging the unique potential of every child. And so what I see in this building and what's really cool is that it's unique to Situate. All the feedback that we got was unique to Situate. I haven't seen another school that we've been to many. And you guys can maybe vote for this. And they're going to go over some of these things that are very unique to Situate. And I think that's a terrific thing. And we'll point some out here, but I just think that's something to be proud of. And that was just because we listened to what you all were saying, and we made sure it was reflected in this building, and that this needs to be the future of education. We want people from other states coming in and saying, this is the school we want to model. And I think the media center is a perfect example. We were pretty, all the feedback we got is that literacy is so important, right? One of the key things we do is teach children to read and write at a very young age, and you do that as family members too. Having the media center, right, as the main entrance with, that open to everybody to see the learning that's happening and the access to literacy, and that being on display for the community, really important. I know we'll get to this, but it's just, I'm pretty excited about it. We also found that parents want a comfortable feel to the school, obviously. When they come in, they want to feel welcome. So there's a welcoming center in here with family reception with comfortable seating while you're waiting to pick up your child, for example, your grandchild, or waiting to see a teacher. Comfortable sit with a table and maybe some magazines to sit, or whatever. But those little details that aren't in other schools that really happen in real life. So you're not in a crowded office waiting for your child. You're in a comfortable area waiting for your child, and you feel welcomed. And the first impression is very important to people. So all those little things that we heard from all of you are reflected in this.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good place to kind of jump off. One of the guiding principles for the design was putting education on display. So when you walk in the front door, seeing the evidence of the learning that's happening in the building in some of the pieces that you can see right out the front door, right from the front door. So the media center really being right front stage, also having the art and the music right close to the front door. There's a gallery going through here. We can imagine some works going up on the walls of the gallery space here. OT and PT right next to the gym. So there's a synchronicity between those two, symbiosis between those two. Down this short passageway is the cafeteria, and that's really treated as a very open space relative to the kitchen. So those are all going to be kind of treated as one space. We were talking about this a little in the meeting this afternoon. This wall here has the potential to be an open, a mobile partition. So the whole thing really opens up, and we can get maximum flexibility out of the space between the gym and the cafeteria going there. Yeah, sure.
The other thing that's been thought about a lot here is community use. It's a community building. So I think the best schools I've ever been part of is just as much action going on at night as in the day. So folks are using it for meetings, for activities, using fields, facilities. So mostly you see that in high schools and middle schools. It's not very common in elementary because they're small. So I think the genius behind this is some of this idea with the calf and the gym with that wall being able to open, that becomes a very large area. So if some groups wanted to meet there, the community wanted to meet there, some town meeting groups wanted to have host meetings there, that's a very big space. And back to the media center. You can walk right in the front door, and that beautiful media center is accessible for community use after hours. Whether it's PTO meetings, whether it's other public venues you want to have. So we thought that was very important, and that was also something that we got from the feedback, that this is a community building, and we want it open, pretty much 24/7 too.
Yeah, and dovetailing on that, there are natural separations in the building between the academic areas and the public areas. So there's a door here and a door here, door here and a door here. So these areas can be locked off at night, and people would only have access to the central part of the building. We could even design it so that just the media center is accessible if we wanted to do something like that. We haven't really gotten into that level of detail yet. But yeah, so for both a community use aspect as well as the safety aspect, those academic wings have the ability to be locked off at those points. Now, the other obvious major feature in this design option here are the courtyards. What's great about the courtyards is they allow natural light deep into the plan. They allow views from these spaces. This happens to be colored green here, so this is the idea is that's the pre-K lunch area. So they would eat separate from the large cafeteria, little kids, little space for eating. So they have that ability, and they're looking into the courtyard here as well. And on the upper elementary, these extended learning areas are looking into the courtyard. And so when you're walking down this curved corridor here, you're really getting views. You know, there's no walls here necessarily, so you're getting views into that courtyard all the time that you're walking along there. So, you know, as Jason was saying earlier, this option really gives you that view to the outside, both on the inner layer of space and on the outer layer where the classrooms are.
These outdoor environments were born out of one of the school tours. And that particular building only had one courtyard, but because of the desire to separate lower elementary students and upper elementary students in sort of two halves of the building, we articulated this to have courtyards that can be programmed to be developmentally appropriate for each age group. And Scott, you always talk about this so eloquently. Can I put you on the spot and sort of talk about that
Sure.
a little bit?
Yes, so I had the privilege to visit and tour 3 elementary schools with our leadership team. I'm a 20-year employee of the public school system in Massachusetts, 16 years as a principal. I was first and foremost just floored and blown away by the opportunities that our town and community could benefit by these models. The courtyard model is very nice because you capture it's a campus of an elementary learning place, but you differentiate between the lower grades, which require different academic interventions, and then you have an upper elementary cluster. So that, I think in itself, lends itself to the differentiation model for really robust instruction. I am a big fan of this model. I believe I speak for our leadership team and my friends that I work with. The tours gave great insight as to what could happen. It's very exciting. And the courtyard model lends itself also because you have a center where children can play freely, but there's also a security measure. So they have the benefit of outdoor play and play exploration, but it's in a very secure location. I think that's a very important point. Did I capture that? Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you, Scott.
I just wanted to, there's one thing that I'm glad you brought up. I won't even attempt to talk that. It was perfectly said. Safety is talked about throughout this. Like, how can we ensure the safest school possible? And that's what we love about the courtyards when we visited. But now there's the upper, which would look a little differently for the older kids. They play different, they learn differently. So it's twofold. It's a learning area where picture our 4th grade teacher wants to take a class outside on a nice day to read, to teach a class. It's also a place for play during recess. You go out there and play. So it's multiple uses, and it's divided. So both may look different. We haven't got to exactly what they look like, but they're age appropriate, size appropriate. So I think that's important. But the other big thing that we really love besides having outdoor playgrounds, multiple ones, also age appropriate in the locations, another benefit for having the lower grades and the upper grades separated a little bit. We also talk about transitions. You know, having the little folks walk across buildings to get to the gym and get to the library, it's wasted time. If you could have it close by and accessible, again, all that's really important. But the safety aspect of having that play in a safe environment was really appealing to us.
Yes, sir.
Along that subject of safety, the fact that we have to think about it, but I think we do, and I'm sure you probably have. But you talked about access. But what about egress? Should there be some sort of emergency that occurs? A fire or an incident, an intrusion into the building, or how, where would the egress from some of these areas in that school occur.
So we can certainly point those out in the floor plan, but we can assure you that from an evacuation point of view, whether it's a fire or an active shooter or some other crisis event, we're providing multiple ways to get out of every part of the building. And just sort of a hint of that, if we think about this plan being in 3 parts, the lower elementary part, the upper elementary part, and the shared part in the middle, they can all be compartmentalized to prevent someone traveling between those segments. But when you prevent people from traveling between segments, you still have to be able to get out. So in this central portion, for example, this is an exit, this is an exit, this is an exit, and this is an exit. So there are 4 ways out of that central core. In the academic areas, this is a way out, and you would travel through to get out here, and you would travel through to get out there. So there are 3 ways out of the lower elementary end. And then similarly on the north end, here's a way out, there's a way out, and there's a way out. So we're trying to think about all of those different possibilities, and it's part of the reason why we're collaborating so closely with public safety to make sure we're thinking about all the various scenarios that we have to plan for.
I can add that too. Yeah. And currently, operationally, we do that every year with public safety, especially the police. They meet with us, we've done it this summer, we have a safety committee in place. And they look at each building, they break up the maps of each building, they look at all the safety points, we have professional input from the police. Then we train all of our teachers before the first day of school. They're all trained on how to egress, where to go from every single specific classroom. They actually practice that, and then we work with the kids. So that's something we really, so that's what, when we decide on the one, probably one of the first things we do is we sit down with public safety, especially fire and police, and get their professional opinion on where's the safest way to go out, and we'll meet with the teachers, come up with a plan, and put it in place.
Not to belabor this particular concept, but at the outset, the superintendent mentioned that there are some things that we thought about that are completely unique to Situate. I just want to mention one more. There are no classrooms on the inner ring of the courtyard. All of the classrooms are intentionally on the outer ring of the courtyard to provide an acoustical buffer between any noisy activities that are happening in the courtyard and classroom activities. I don't know of any other project in the Commonwealth that has that particular feature. It has the added benefit of providing daylight to those extended learning spaces that I mentioned earlier, but that's something that's wholly unique to this project that I think the district and the design team are both excited about, both architecturally and educationally.
Yeah, we appreciate that because we're living it now with the gym, and what would be the difference really if the classrooms abutting the courtyard still be noisy, right? So I think they did a real nice job of allowing that so that the kids can go out there and have some fun, make some noise, and not as well.
One other feature that I'd really like to point out, and it's easier to see it on the second floor. So in the second floor plan, again, on the lower elementary side, you've got grade 1 and grade 2, and we have these extended learning areas, but they're slightly differently shaped up here because the classrooms are smaller. So we have these openings in the floor, and there's a stair that goes up to get you up to the second floor of those openings, and it's the ability to look down into those spaces. And what's nice about that, 2 things are nice about it. It gets light deeper into the plan because there isn't that second floor plate in the way. That's one thing, so you get light deeper in. The other thing is it connects the 2 floors, so the kids feel more like they're part of a big whole when they are able to see the younger kids kind of looking up and seeing the older kids and saying, oh, I'm going to be up there someday, you know. So that feature happens in a couple different places around, you know. In the upper elementary here, there's a 2-story space, and there's a couple of 2-story spaces in the lower elementary over here. And then circulation-wise, there's a connector corridor between the 2 so that people can get back and forth easily between the 2. Centrally located here, we have the academic coach's office, and then they also have a couple of places where they can do testing or work one-on-one with kids in those spaces. But typically those folks are going to be going out and working with kids in the wings. But it is centrally located so they can be utility on both sides, have utility. And then we have also a look down into the cafeteria from this area over here so you can see down in. And then there's also possibilities for windows to look down into the gym. So this will not be sort of a dull, dry corridor. It will still have a lot of activity and light and views out to the outside as well. So,
Can You pointed to extended learning spaces in this model, probably?
Yeah, so we have one here, one right here, and then one here and one here.
The ones that are part of the classroom, I mean,
Server rooms.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's a great feature. So in both the lower and the upper elementary, we have a shared small group room, which is also an extension of the classroom area. And that's a place also where kids can work with specialists, they can work in a group, in a small group with a teacher or independently, do one-on-one learning. In the lower elementary grades, we also have individual toilet rooms that are right off the classroom, and that helps keep the kids kind of together so that they don't have long trips to the bathroom. It also keeps them closer to the learning aspect when they're there. And then the upper elementary grades have a group toilet room here as well.
I think that bathroom piece is unheard of in first grade, and because that's heaven to teachers and supervision and all that rest of it. But those purple learning rooms you talked about in the T-plane, you saw they were kind of outside the room. I think the genius of this and very unique to Situate is, right now we have kids that they have to go see a speech therapist or they leave the room. It's a little ostracizing, let's be honest, it's the old school way. Here they never have to leave the classroom. The teacher comes to them, they seamlessly slip into the room, or it could be used for group work or an extended learning opportunity for some kids doing an enrichment project. The sky is the limit for the teachers. It's just extra space that's typically in another area of the building, now incorporated into the classroom. So it's really creatively done, and so I wanted to point that out, which is seamlessly accessed from both classrooms, so that the teachers, the two first grade teachers, for example, that are team teaching, hey, I'm going to use it now, do you want to team up and do some things together? So the infinite opportunities for learning and for some visionary learning to take place because of the physical structure of the rooms.
And then another feature here, these pink rooms are the special education rooms, and they are distributed throughout the plan. So special education is fully integrated into the peer education experience that's happening all around them in both the upper and lower. So now we're going to come to the cost estimate portion of our program tonight. And there are some things that we want you to keep in mind. And this is very similar to last time. These are estimates to compare the relative cost between the options. So they're not final cost estimates. They are a good idea of where the costs are going to end up in a very general way. They're order of magnitude. They're not exact cost analysis. They're a little more detailed than we did the first round, but they're still very generic in their analysis. So just generally speaking, since the first estimate, some costs have gone up, others have gone down, some have stayed roughly the same, but ultimately the whole picture looks very similar to where we were last time around. So here we have just kind of the overall slide that shows the price tag of the particular options. Option 1 coming in at $62 million. Again, yeah, that's the lowest number on the screen, but it's also the option that doesn't give you any educational improvements. And it's also unlikely that the MSBA would participate in that option. That would be totally on the town to shoulder that option. The ad renovation options are a tad bit more than the new construction options, and the reason for that is, as we talked about before, there's all of that movement of students between the swing space and the renovated spaces of their classroom areas that adds to the cost of those options. And then there's also duration. There's a longer duration that adds to the cost of those options. So those are a shade more than the new construction options. The courtyard options, the option 7, which is the K5 model, is less than the 3K5 model because there's less area in the building. There's less program there. So more program, more cost. So it's roughly about a $10 million difference And that's what we have been seeing since the beginning in terms of the cost to add those pre-K classrooms in. And then option 19, the T option, comes in a little bit less than the other ones. They're very close, in the same ballpark for sure. But this one, I think unanimously with the school building committee is the favorite for all of those reasons that we've been listed. So now we flip, and this next slide shows very approximate, and I want to say very approximate and stress that really, because what we're trying to do, we had a little discussion about this beforehand, what we're trying to do is have a reasonable prediction of what the town share might be. So we start out with the base reimbursement rate for the town being 43%, and then you do have to say it's 43% of eligible costs, and there are a lot of costs in a project that are not eligible. So we end up with a rate that is not that full rate. So just as a place to start, we started with 28%. So that goes from 42 to 28% of eligible costs. So these numbers are less 28% from the numbers that we just looked at in gold. So interestingly, the option 1 with no MSBA participation starts to look very similar, starts to look closer to the other options that are on the table there.
I have a question about option 1.
Yeah.
Does that is the renovation or repair
Repair.
only of Hatherly and nothing happens to Cushing at all?
That is actually the repair of both.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we wanted to go apples to apples on that, so that we were talking about the same, roughly the same area of buildings.
And there was a question that
Yeah.
popped up about pre-Ks. Did you see that?
I did.
Okay.
So the question was, if pre-K is not in the project, then what happens in that space? The answer is it's not in the project. So if you think about the floor plans in the pre-K 5 model, pre-K and K are on the ground, and 1 and 2 are above them. In the K5 model, K and 1 are on the ground, and 2 is on the second floor by itself. So the square footage associated with those pre-K classrooms actually comes out of the project completely, and there is no extra space in that, which is why it costs less, because there's actually less building in the K5 model than the pre-K5 model. Whoever asked that question, did that answer what you were looking for?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
In other than option 1, has the decision been made about what happened to Cushing School?
No. So there is a kind of below the line cost for demolishing Cushing and bringing that back to kind of a planted field status. I think that was 2.8 something million. So that would get added onto these numbers. And the disposition of Cushing School is really up to the school committee as to what they would do with that building.
I think that's a great question. We haven't started that conversation. We got down to one, because where's going to be Cushing or Hatherly? We ruled out the Cushing now, and now we get to the one. I think soon the conversations will be starting with the school committee in the town, the select board and stuff, about the other buildings to be a town decision.
Has it been decided already, I'm assuming it has, that the replacement building will be at the site of Hatherly School? Have you considered any other options for putting up on the school?
We did at the very beginning. We actually looked at all sites that were over, I think it was 10 acres in the town. And I gotta say, I'm not exaggerating here, I think probably 80% of them were protected natural areas, totally inundated with wetlands, or any of those kinds of things. They had limited site access. They weren't really in the center of town, so they were kind of out on the eastern edge of town, which is really where all the unbuilt land is. So none of those really turned up to be suitable sites for a school. And we were basically going off the same property list that the town just used to site the sewage treatment plant. So it was a similar exercise.
In the back of the Gates property was among those that was talked about, and it was just determined to not be big enough.
The old Gates.
The old
Yeah,
Gates.
the old Gates.
The old Gates.
Yes.
Yeah. Great questions, though.
Yeah.
In the presentation that came out in the email, it talked about the plan for most class sizes to be between 20 and 22 people, 20 to 22 students. Trying to roughly get to what does that mean, I think I came up with that we need 70 classrooms from pre-K through 5 to accommodate 20 to 22 kids per class. Does this accommodate that with all the other existing schools?
Yes.
Yeah, so from a district-wide capacity perspective, once you add this building into the mix, we will have more space than is necessary at that 23 students per classroom number. We're very close to that, but we've intentionally used class size guidelines to ensure that there's a little bit of wiggle room to accommodate enrollment growth. And so it's not a precise fit for the enrollment projection. It's a little bit fuzzy so that we don't have to add classrooms, very quickly after the project is complete. But yes, the total number of classrooms, once we factor in this project, is sufficient to accommodate the pre-K-5 population across the whole district, including adding a little bit of capacity to grow the existing pre-K program.
Second part of that is, do we have existing staff for that? Or are we going to be adding staff now and the cost of that staff to the project?
No, you wouldn't have to add staff, because you're consolidating 2 buildings into 1. So you still have the same amount of kids in the district, we still need the same amount of services. So when we get to that point, we'll have to look at where the staff are best placed. Some might go to other schools, but we'll certainly have ample staff. We won't have that. Good.
Yeah, I mean, to say Jason's answer a different way, when the MSBA originally looked at the proposed enrollment, the design enrollment for this building, 460 kids, they were assuming that we're looking at the district, the whole district-wide. So if you add the present Hatherly plus Cushing populations, that's more than 460 kids. So some of those kids will have to go to the 2 other schools along with other communities. So district-wide, it'll be kind of an equalization.
If I may, another, in these 4 estimates, $80 to $88 million, what's the projected impact to our tax for the cost of this?
That is coming. We don't have that calculation yet, but that's coming.
I have it.
Can you hold off on that until?
Yeah, I can hold off on it, but I think it's a legitimate question that
Oh, it's totally legitimate,
needs to be
yes.
answered. So, just based on this year's average home value in Situate, which is $822,000, that's pretty high, right? So this is the highest.
That's your average or your median? Or are they
Yep.
basically the same?
Average, yeah.
I know they're not the same average.
Yep. So this is from our finance director. It's well vetted. This is a 25-year note, so, and this is assuming the 86.5. So the highest possible. So this is top, right? So it's $935.95 on that $866,000 valued home. So if your home isn't at that value, it'll obviously be lower. And that's in year 1. In the 25 years, it decreases as that goes down.
So it's $935 the first year.
Yep. But on a home value of $866,000. So if your home is valued less than that, it's obviously going to be less. If your home is valued more, it will be more.
And also depending on how the next round of cost estimates and
Right.
all of the calculations shake out. Right? Anytime we're reporting costs, we want to be careful that these aren't hard and fast numbers that.
It's a ballpark.
Yeah, I
Jump in there.
think it's important to say, so when we get down to the 1, and you can see we're getting really close to that, what happens between now and the end of December? End of December is when we're going to submit kind of the schematic design package, the number. Calculated, at this point, cost estimates have been, the first set was 1 page for each of the 23 options. Well, for this set, it's 2 or 3 pages. Where we're going to get by the end of December is about 30 pages for the one building that we're going to do. And then the budget will turn into this large 120-line spreadsheet that the state sends us that will calculate all of our hard costs, all of our soft costs. We'll actually calculate what that rate actually is going to be. Situate's starting rate is 43. That's what it is right now for the agreement that's in place. When the calendar flips, that number might get tweaked. On top of that, there are incentive points for, the great job Kevin does with, maintenance in the town buildings that will bring that up a little bit. Then we have to deal with all the cost caps, right? The MSBA only reimburses that 40 whatever percent on the first $393 of construction. Anybody who's tried to build anything knows that it's way more than that, right? It's about, double, if not higher than that. You only get the reimbursement up to that 393. And that's why when you see that first number, wait a minute, how does 40-something become 20-something? That's how that happens. So be really, to the number that was just given per family, per average single family home, that number will change. These numbers will change. We hope they don't change drastically, either up or down, but this, as Tom said in the beginning, these estimates were done to kind of show the relative nature of these projects one to each other. But in the end, is the number going to be 86? Is it going to be 84? Is it going to be 85? Is it going to be 88? We will know that over the next 4 months as we take this one option and really get to work on it and develop really detailed plans, really detailed cost estimates, not plans that will be bid, but plans that cost estimators can really dig into and understand the details. As of right now, we're really still working in cost per square foot nature of things.
There was a question over there on the side. Do you still have a question?
This may be a silly question, but combining the two schools, it seems like the class sizes are going to correct.
They shouldn't. What the MSBA determined in their enrollment forecast was that there was surplus capacity already in the district. And so anytime the MSBA partners with the community on a project, they want to make sure that the project does everything it can to right-size that capacity across particularly elementary school districts. So that's what's happening here.
Because my child currently has 16 kids in her class, and we're talking about 23 to 24.
So I can actually comment on that. So right now we have 4 elementary schools. So the class sizes, unfortunately, can sometimes be inequitable depending on where you live. So I don't know what grade that is, but if your child is in a class of 16 in one building, that same class at a different school could be 22. And if we want to be equitable, we really would want them divided equally across all the grades, so everybody would be at about 18.
No, I just wanted to be clear, because it
Yeah.
just seems, it was nice having a really small class, and we go to one school, so I don't know what it's like in other elementary schools.
So it's different at each school, and it's different at each grade level, depending on enrollment. So that will look different in 5 years from now. But when it comes to dividing students across classes, you would actually have 4 sections minimally, correct me if I'm wrong, at every grade level in this school, which would allow us to divide the students more equally there. Especially at Hatherly right now, you only have 2 sections. That's it. It's a very tiny school. So that has its limitations. The other schools have 3 sections.
The other thing too is philosophically, what's attracting me to apply here is that the town supported schools. Schools are beautiful, but that the class sizes were small. They're extremely small. If you look at this year's numbers, that's a commitment from the school committee. Directive to me is keep, especially elementary we're talking, okay? Even in all grades, you look at surrounding towns, and that 16 is not uncommon. I think most all elementary schools are 20 and under, at least under 25 for sure. And we've made a commitment to that, and that means if we have to hire a teacher, or if a teacher leaves the middle of high school, we have extra a spot, and we say elementary, And then even more specifically, pre-K to 3. Those class sizes are really small. And that's all purpose, and it's a commitment to Situate, so that's not going to change here. They did a really, MSBA, they're putting out a lot of money. So I think philosophically, we have to think of a couple things here. I think John brought this up. Can we afford, the price is going to be important. It's very important. We want to get that out there and we want to know what the impact is to taxpayers, to have that honest conversation. And why I appreciate this being out here is we could easily say it's 43%, because that's what the MSBA said. But it's really not 43. It's really 28. So we're coming out very early and saying we're being conservative on this, and we're going to go to the bottom level to be honest with folks. I guess, again, back to the question is, can we afford not to take the state's money here? We've got 2 buildings that are going to fall into the ground in a few years, and we're going to have to replace anyways. If you're not familiar with the process, it started before I came, 4 years ago, where it's very competitive. And towns and towns are battling to get the approval of the MSBA to be in this program to get reimbursed at all. In fact, they stopped doing it in the capital side of things because they ran out of money. So we're lucky we got in. I just did the quick math. I think it's $33.5 million on the low end on 28 to get reimbursed on schools that are going to have to be fixed. Now, okay, if we say no to this and give up that $33.5 million gift from the state, and we start, putting duct tape on things a little bit, all that capital money starts to go and get drained by these 2 schools. And then you got Band-Aids around, classrooms around the gym. So, again, I wanted to point all that out, can we afford not to do this? With 33.5, and again, these numbers are very, very big now. When in 2, 3, 4 years, all your money is going to be thrown. Just think of your home. If you've got this older house, you have an opportunity to build a new one, and someone's going to come in and give you 30%, get a new one. And almost, versus, doing all the repair work, or in 5 years coming around and saying, no, you know what, we got to build 2 new schools now, but we can't get back in. Once you get out of the MSBA program, you can apply to get back in. And I'm going to tell you right now, common sense will tell me that if we've been in the program, we back out, we get a no vote, or we say no, there's so many towns fighting for it, we're never going to get back in. So it might be a once in a while opportunity. So that's why we're trying to show folks here that our other buildings are in very good shape. We're putting money into them. We're not going to come back in a couple of years and ask for another school because this is a lot of money. And I know there's people on fixed incomes, and that's real. So what we're also doing here is trying to get this number down, without giving up the educational value of this. I know these guys have already, I think it's come down a little since the last time. I know we'll be flexible. We're very cognizant of and appreciative of folks that are on a fixed income, or anybody, just the taxes in general. But again, it's back to that value in the town. We're adding value to your taxes by improving property rates because you have great schools. So I just want to give my 2-minute speech on philosophically where I stand.
There was another question in the back that someone wanted to ask. Yes.
Me?
Yes, go ahead.
This is kind of a logistic question. If in fact you go with either one of the new construction options, and it is at the Hatherly site, where will the students who are attending Hatherly School go while there is new construction?
So the site plan was designed specifically with that in mind.
Okay.
The students, actually, the existing Hatherly students stay in the school,
Okay.
and the new school is built right next to them. I mean,
I figured you probably would.
yeah, most of our new construction projects happen this way, where a new building, sometimes very close, is built to next to the existing building, and so the construction's happening. Now, it's a very different story from the construction actually happening within the building, which is that reno option that we were talking about.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I have a logistic question,
Oh, sure.
please. The students that are at Cushing, when this one opens up, do they just all transfer into that new school, or do they get split into other elementary schools?
So, a little both.
Okay.
So we did call back, I probably don't remember that one, but we're timing this is very good so that we'll open the new building in the fall, a new school year, we finished over the summer, maybe even earlier, which is nice. And an ugly word in school districts is called redistricting. which means we have to do some demographic studies on how do we shift and where folks live most closer to the school that they'll attend. Because the math will tell you if these two schools add up to about 600 and we're going down to 470. So maybe 100 students might have to be moved to other schools. We don't know where they are or where they live yet, because it's premature to do that 5 years out. But we do want to be transparent and honest that not everybody in the current schools, or at least where you live right now, will go to these two schools. That's just the real deal of it. And that's why we thought about the pre-K. We said, okay, at least everybody that lives in the entire town will have access to pre-K. And that was a panel we went with MSBA, and it goes back to having the class sizes small. They do a thorough review of every single classroom in our entire district, of all the elementary schools. How many kids were in there, closet space. And they came in with a number of 370 initially, 100 less. We were like 600 to 370, we can't do that. So we went back and they gave us 470. And that was it, we cut it off at that. Right? So that was the good news. So, no, not all 600 kids will go there, some will have to move to other schools, but that's to be determined. Thank you.
And then back, yes.
Yes, my question is actually quite related to those of the ones that came before it. When we talk about the redistricting, there are many of us, I think, in the audience who have young children, and this will be a reality for us in the near future, and we're starting to think about those transitions for us now. Are you able to give any insight about what that plan may look like and what perhaps some of the criteria are for where school assignments may or may not happen?
Well, none at this point. I think the best I can say is we'll have a professional demographer look at that, and then we'll have to look at, I think it's a lot of geography, obviously, bus routes, those types of things, inconvenience of families and parents. We don't want students over here driving by one school to go to another. So all that kind of stuff in the geographics of the town, which is very unique, have to be considered, but with professional help, we can do that. And I think originally that's kind of what MSBA did, but not to the degree that we'll need. And there'll be conversations with the community about that, and it'll be a very inclusive and involved process, but a necessary one. To answer your question, in short, we don't have the details at this point.
Any other questions? All right. So just briefly, what changed? As I said before, some things went up, other things went down. Construction renovation costs. So the first estimate we did was about 3 months ago. So since 3 months, construction costs have edged up a little bit. That's just market forces that are happening right now. Site costs on most of these options came down because we have a more detailed plan that the cost estimators were able to sink their teeth into a little bit more grading information on the options. The escalation has been reduced because we're now 3 months closer to the beginning of the construction. So they just reduce the amount of, when they do the estimate, they're basically assuming I have net present today dollars, but I'm escalating them to the start of construction. And then within the construction numbers, those numbers are escalated to the midpoint of construction. So they have built in kind of an assumption of how construction costs are going to go up as the timeline goes on for the project. And then the construction soft costs, which are basically the costs, not the actual cost of doing the work, but the other costs that the contractor incurs. Those are all percent functions of the cost of the work, so those go down slightly in most cases. So there's some ups and some downs, but we're roughly where we were before. Yes.
In all of the cost estimates for the options, were what I'll call the furnishings and fixtures of the needs of the schools built into these costs, desks, chairs, etc.
Yes, yeah, those are built into, so we have the construction cost numbers, which I didn't even show you. What we were showing you are the project cost numbers. So that's all of the construction costs, all of the contractor's costs, fixtures and equipment, technology, the design fees are all part of that stuff. So it's all kind of rolled into the
But as we move forward in the next 4 months, all of those things will be broken out. So when you're at this high level of estimate, we were putting 30 to 35% on the construction number to capture all of those other costs. as we move it forward from this point, now it's actually getting the quote from Doran Whittier for what they're gonna charge, getting more specific on what are we gonna carry for a contingency, how much are we going to allow per pupil spending for furniture, fixtures and equipment, for technology. All of that stuff will be broken out. So the next time you see numbers, a few months from now or 3 months from now, be careful what you wish for, because it's going to be a lot of them. But that's the level of detail that frankly everyone should see and the MSBA requires to approve a project.
Budget sheet is an 11 by 17, 2 sides, very small print, lots of lines. Just a brief mention of the energy code. So the energy code in Massachusetts, the bar has been raised significantly. This project estimate is including all of those costs. So those are all included in there. It's a much more stringent energy code. There is an MSBA incentive called the Green Schools Program where they will give the district 4% more. It used to be 2%. Now it's 4%. But what they're assuming in that added number is that it's going to be a much more efficient mechanical and electrical system. So, and those are more costly. So they're kicking in more money to pay for those systems. We're studying right now the geothermal mechanical system, more expensive, but would qualify us for that extra 4%. And we're looking at whether the added cost of that system is going to be balanced out by the additional 4%. No answer on that yet, but we're definitely studying that right now. So for right now, we're keeping with that 28% reimbursement rate. And again, that's one of the factors that will probably change as we get deeper into this.
Just a quick, on the last slide. Just a quick on the last slide. The base mechanical system doesn't qualify for green school.
That's right.
That we're not looking at base, we're looking at lead silver.
Okay, so let me get into that. So the MSBA requires now that the project be LEED silver just as a base prerequisite, pretty much. So the system that we have estimated meets that standard, but it doesn't meet the additional standard to get the additional 4%. Yeah. So it's like the bar for energy code went from here to here. Well, energy code and LEED went from here to here. We've got that covered, but mechanical system is an additional coverage. Now, also included in all of that are utility incentives. Those come in at the end of the project. We can't really count on them in these numbers, but they're part of the overall equation, and they come in at the end. And there's ARPA money in there, and there's incentives of the utilities. Yep. Yeah, that's good. The ARPA money is actually going to be a real game changer. We're talking about that in the office right now. It's pretty neat stuff. So last segment here, this is the criteria rating system that we use. We have a rating matrix, which you'll see in a second, but we basically use this kind of color coding to indicate that how well each of the options satisfies the criteria. And you'll see the criteria in a second too. But it's fairly simple. It's kind of color coded. Green is better, and that gets a higher score of 5. And it kind of goes down through, and red is worse and gets a score of 1. So we then total up those numerical scores, and you can kind of see how the options are shaking out. So without any further ado, if people came to the last, some of you I recognize from the last segment that we did on this, we had all 23 options on this matrix, and it was a big ungainly document. So now it's smaller. We only have the 6 options across the top, and then we also consolidated some of the criteria down the side here. So we have site criteria, which is basically best site planning, circulation, queues, parking and drop-off. So like all of those site-related criteria. Best access to playgrounds and outdoor learning and site amenities, and that includes the courtyards as amenities as well. So those options will score better than the others. And then the big one that we've been talking about in terms of logistics is least disruptive to students during construction. So the ad reno options score very low on those, and the new construction options score higher on those. In the building criteria, kind of the omnibus is that number one criteria, best supports the district's educational goals and the guiding principles for design. So that's got a lot of stuff rolled into it, but that's one of the most important criteria there. Best supports safety and security goals, and we talked about that during the presentation. Best supports community use of the building, we talked about that as well. And then best supports sustainability goals. There's going to be more talk about that later. These are just kind of site sustainability related goals here. And then a cost ranking. And really what we did here was we basically broke it into kind of like a bell curve. The highest cost options got the lowest score. A grouping in the middle got the middle score of 2 points. And then the lowest cost option got the 3 points, the highest score. So that's just purely based on the least cost option is the best. But we have all of these other criteria for that grade K5 repair only that really sink that option in terms of its score. So even though it's the lowest cost, it's also the lowest scoring on this scale. Yeah, so not scoring very well at all on the building aspects, scoring very low on the disruptive to students, and somewhat in the middle on the site planning configurations here. Just kind of focusing everyone's attention on the courtyard option here, option 18. This one scores highest on site planning, access to playgrounds, and kind of bumps it up because of the courtyard. None of these scored a 5 on least disruptive, just because it is, the buildings are close to the existing building. Not ideal, but it is what it is. And then really very clearly outshining the others on the building criteria here. So even with a low score for the slightly higher price tag, it still comes in kind of head and shoulders above the other options in this ranking here. So I'll pause. Yes, questions? Yes.
There's a huge discrepancy between 7 and 18 on best support district educational area. How does it go from just a 1 to a 5? They're both courtyard concepts. The only difference is pre-K versus K.
You know what? I think that might be an error. That's not supposed to be like that. Yeah, I think that was just a copying error. I'll have to correct that.
But it wouldn't be a 5 because the district placed such a high priority on pre-K being part of the project.
No, that's the reason why it scored so low, because it doesn't have a pre-K included in it. So for that particular criteria, we decided in this round that having pre-K was going to be head and shoulders above just having K5. So yeah.
And all the feedback we've gotten since the beginning, overwhelming support has come from the pre-K. But it's a very good question.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Actually, at the last public forum, that was the biggest push to make sure that pre-K was included. That was very loud.
Yeah, so that was really looked at differently than the way we looked at that criteria last time, and that was one of the key changes. Yeah, but thank you for pointing that out.
So with your devices, we have an opportunity to pause here, and you can ask more questions. But if you have other feedback for the design team, for the district, you can use this moment to write that in. We'll get that captured and we'll review that and fold that into our discussions before any decisions about the one option are made final. Don, you had something to add?
Can you keep the login again? I don't know if everyone's able to grab the.
Oh, right. Go back to the beginning.
Everybody see that?
Does anybody need assistance getting that onto their phone, or we good?
You
go to that menu.com, it should show this is easy, well, if you have trouble getting that image. MENTI.com.
Okay.
And then you put that number in, 5668, etc.
And if anyone wants to just go old school and write something on a piece of paper, we've got pads here. We'll take your feedback however we can get it.
Are there any final questions or comments that folks want to make outside of the digital platform here in the room this evening? Yes.
I just wanted to ask a question about the price per square foot on the construction, just ballpark. How does that match up to any other schools that have been recently completed in surrounding areas?
Do you want to answer that question? You want us to answer that question?
Yeah, I will tell you, so our firm, and these guys can tell you too, our firm's involved in probably a half dozen schools right now, and everybody is estimating around $890 a square foot for construction, just for construction. Plus, so then you would take the add 30 to 35% for budgeting purposes for right now. You know, the way the estimators estimate is that they're going to give us a number that's the middle of the pack on bid day. You would never want to go with the lowest price school that's out on the market right now and go, Town X got it for $750, great, carry $750, and then yours comes in at $850, $100 a square foot off. You blow the budget by $5 or $6 million, and then you're left with an appropriation that doesn't meet the bid on bid day, because with the MSBA, we have to agree to a number a year and a half or so before we bid the job. So that's what December is. When we come to that number in December, we're then going to, you know, they're going to approve it in February. We're going to bring it to the town meeting and vote in April, and then these guys have to design for another year, and then put the job out to bid on the street. And only at that point do you do it. Do you know for sure? But that's how you have to do business with the MSBA. And so the estimators are always giving you a number that is conservative enough to carry, but not so conservative that it scares everybody away. But unfortunately, because of what happened over the last 18 months to 2 years with escalation, with inflation, that's the number right now. The hope is that on bid day, we've got a lot of stuff, between us, jobs that are in design, jobs that are coming up for bidding. We will continue to monitor pricing. Once the town hopefully votes for the project, we will then do 3 additional cost estimates throughout the design phase. So once at design development and a couple during construction documents, their estimator will review the plans and check the number. Our estimator will review the plans and check the number, and then they'll reconcile against each other to make sure that if that number is 120, we are tracking against that 120 at 3 other data points, so that if by some chance there are some spikes in the market, we can react to it as a project team, and whether that's doing some alternates, changing some finishes, doing something to make sure that we control those costs and keep them under budget the whole way.
So there's one question up here that you want to respond to about pre-K. The way pre-K currently works in the district, there are some students who are receiving half-day programming, other students who are receiving full-day programming, and we've designed the project to accommodate that model moving forward. So they have 5 pre-K classrooms in the project. Currently, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are only 4 pre-K classrooms in the district currently. So this represents an expansion of the pre-K program. And depending on how many students need which kind of services will ultimately dictate what the capacity of those 5 classrooms will be.
I'm glad you brought that up, because right now we have a waiting list for our pre-K, and so we encumbered that in this to say, let's make sure we don't leave anybody without an opportunity for pre-K, so that was, we hadn't brought it up.
And I think the important thing of that program is that, as Phil said, we'll be way ahead of the program, and it's going to come. There's no question that the state is going to demand it to come, and we will be far better prepared with approving with the plan with the pre-K. The other one, I have one thing I want to say. If I was a young parent today, well, thank heaven I'm not, I'd be worried hell about what the heck is going to happen in the next 10 years. I talk to my grandchildren, and I talk about the black rotary phone I had, and seeing an IBM room with big as this, and every one of your little phones now has the capacity of that. And it blows my mind. So, to me, a program and a building and a concept and what they're trying to do is, it is very, very important. But most important is this: we're all getting older. And don't we want people who have had a positive education, a good experience, when older people have to come to get help, that they will be the ones to say, hey, these people helped me get through school. The least I can do is pay it forward and help them.
All right, Bruce.
We can always count on Bruce. There's another question here about the sort of voting process. So part of the logic in coming to you, the community, tonight, to sort of get a sense of how people feel about the short list of options that are still under consideration. From everything we've heard tonight and what we're seeing sort of in the feedback and discussion here that's happening live, is that there's a consensus forming around option 18, that courtyard option that includes pre-K. The school building committee will review this feedback and have an additional discussion, but ultimately it's the school building committee who will decide which one option moves on to the next step. When that happens, the community will have an opportunity to vote on the funding for that one option. It's not a process where we put all of the options on the wall on funding day and everybody gets to vote for their favorite one, and the one that gets the most votes wins. You're only voting on whether or not to fund a single option. So we just want to be clear about responding to that question. So this meeting was about sort of feeling everybody out about the short list that we have. The school building committee will identify the one, and then I believe it's going to be next spring, right? A funding vote will occur related to that one option.
Yes.
I think it's important also to mention that tonight's a public meeting, but to that question, school building meetings are public open meetings. So if someone wants to come to listen when those types of things are being discussed, everybody's always welcome.
And also, thank you, Julie. We have a website with a whole page dedicated to this project with all previous meetings. This meeting will be up there. If you want to go and do some research, and for all future meetings, if you're not able to get it, or you want to just kind of check in, our website's very easy, sit.org. And if you go to community, you'll see that there's a whole page just all things new building project. And we're working on a frequently asked questions section, and some of this will be helpful too to kind of get some of these questions answered. Hopefully it'll be more convenient for all of you and to educate other people that weren't able to make it tonight, so that everyone has the most information. So, and then if you have any suggestions when you go onto the website, please share them, because we're always looking, we only see it from our perspective, but as you, as in your role in the community, can share with us what would be helpful to you, especially when we get to the frequently asked questions. If there's something that we're missing that you want answered or up there that you think a lot of people are talking about, that's very helpful to us to include to educate everyone on what's happening.
Yes, sir.
There's a question up here that brings to another question. What would need to happen or not happen to lose the MSBA funding? Is the MSBA funding guaranteed?
No.
So we could be at a project point where we're on the hook for the whole thing?
No.
No. The MSBA fund, this process that we're running through is part of their process that leads to approval. We will submit the final design, the final choice, the final budget in December. They will vote on it, I'm sorry, February, keep doing that to you. February, they will vote on it at their April board meeting, and then after that, it will be brought to the town for a vote. You will know at that, when it's brought to you, that the MSBA has approved the project.
I'll just add to that the MSBA process is such, and it's intentional, that the MSBA is following the project at every step along the way. And there have been very few circumstances, if any, that I'm aware of, where once it gets to the funding vote for the MSBA money, that they have said no. So it's not guaranteed, but it's highly unlikely that they would turn a project down for one reason or another, as long as we follow the process and responded to their comments all along the way.
Right, at each of these submissions, there are comments. There were comments after the first submission, there'll be comments after this one, there'll be, after this submission, we will have to go and sit with them at least once with folks from the district to talk about the educational plan and how that played into the design. And then once the schematic design is submitted, they will have one final round of comments. So this process is very prescriptive and deliberate and the same from school to district to district to district. So that, they're not in the business of saying no to projects. And if they took real issue with something, I would expect that we would have already heard something about it. They're in the business of getting to yes. And then they look to be able to, put the town in the best position, to be able to say yes themselves.
So to respond to this question correctly, really the only way that the community could lose MSBA funding is for the community to vote the project down.
What's the composition of the MSBA? Are they elected, are they,
They're not elected. They're not appointed either. They are a quasi-governmental agency that was established by the state legislature to oversee this grant funding program. Right? They're under the jurisdiction of the state treasurer. They have an executive director who's hired by a board of directors who's appointed by the state treasurer.
thank you.
All right, so we've been talking a lot about the schedule. I won't belabor this, but really our next steps are to submit the PSR report at the end of this month. And then we've got these, as Bill was just saying, the facility assessment meetings with the MSBA to talk about the educational plan and the plan. The MSBA board meeting will meet and vote on the preferred schematic report in late October. And we really don't have the time to kind of wait for what's happening there. We're reasonably confident that we're going in the right direction, we're going forward. But really the big push here is to get to the schematic design submission in February, and then the public votes that are going to be happening next May. So that's really kind of our focus for the next year. As you pointed out, Julie pointed out, meetings are public. That's what all these little arrows are the school building committee meetings that we're having. We're having them roughly once a month during schematic design. So those will all be public as well. So many opportunities, to have an input on the design process.
Yeah, the building committee meetings during the schematic design phase aren't shown on this yet because the schedule hasn't been finalized yet, but they will be monthly.
Any other questions?
I just want to add something. I left, for those of you who didn't want to write your comment on Mentimeter and see it pop up in front of you on the screen, there's some paper and pencils. If you want to tear off a sheet and write whatever you would like all of us to know with your feedback, please feel free to do that and leave it on the table for us.
Superintendent, any closing words?
No, I just want to thank you. I know it's summertime and everyone's got busy lives, but I'm very proud of the turnout tonight. And I'm even more proud of the questions and the conversation. It's ongoing, and again, it doesn't have to just be at this meeting, so we've given you some avenues to reach out to us. Anybody in the board, me directly. If you don't know who, contact the school district, and we'll give you my information. And again, we're happy to sit down and talk to you, have a coffee, answer your questions. We want this to be fully transparent. We want no surprises. We want to be honest. We want to make the voters very informed so we can make the right decision on behalf of the kids. So, thank you for your time and have a good evening, everybody.